The groom was half an hour late to the wedding. I tried calling Ryan Sullivan over and over, but he never answered. Then suddenly, all the guests' phones rang at once. The top trending topic read, "Heir to the Sullivan Group jumps into river for first love on his wedding day." Other headlines followed. "Old flame returns, is the fiancé about to be dumped? Sullivan Group wedding postponed indefinitely." I tapped on the video titled, "Jumped into river for first love." The man in the custom-made wedding suit was Ryan. He was standing on the bridge pier, his voice trembling. "Emily, I'm not getting married. Come down, you're lying. You're still wearing the engagement ring. I'm not a kid anymore, you can't fool me." The woman sobbing like a child was Emily Young, Ryan's first love from college. At first, I thought maybe Ryan was just trying to save her. After all, there were plenty of firefighters right below her. If they reached out, they could easily pull this delicate girl down to safety. But no, Ryan was doing a real-life hero rescue scene. "I'm not lying, Emily," he said, as he took off the engagement ring we had picked out together and threw it far into the river. That $1 million ring I had carefully chosen now looked like a cheap soda tab as it traced an arc through the air and vanished into the water. "Then why are you still wearing your wedding suit?" Emily whimpered, wiping her tears like a little girl. As he walked toward her, Ryan took off his suit jacket and said gently, "It's freezing. Put this on first." But Emily, still acting spoiled, forgot she was standing at the edge. She pouted and stepped back twice. "I don't want to wear the jacket you are going to marry another woman in." In the dead of winter, wearing only a thin white cotton dress, she lost her balance and fell backward. Ryan's eyes widened. Without hesitation, he lunged forward to catch her and ended up falling in with her. Fortunately, though people called it the Min River, it was really just a regular-sized river, not too high. A couple of young firefighters quickly jumped in and pulled them both out. Emily curled up in Ryan's arms, shivering uncontrollably. "Ryan, I was so scared. If you hadn't been here today, I would have died." "Don't be scared. I'm here," he said softly, gently coaxing her, something I had never seen from him in all the years we'd been together. Because the Ryan I knew was always cold, businesslike and detached, even with me, the woman he was about to marry. "You jumped in to save me. Won't your fiancé be mad, waiting at the altar?" Emily asked, guilt all over her face. Ryan reached out his broad hand and wiped away her perfectly timed tears. "You mean Rachel?" At the mention of my name, he looked completely dismissive, his tone 1/3 indifferent, 7/10 condescending. "Don't worry, as long as she can marry me, she'll put up with anything." Back at the venue, the guests were in an uproar after watching the trending video. "So much for true love," someone scoffed. "Turns out the bride was just marrying into the Sullivan family for the money. No wonder Ryan treated her so coldly. Jumping into a river for another woman on your wedding day?" "A river?" another snorted. "That's barely deeper than a ditch. That girl wouldn't have died even if he hadn't jumped in. But he still threw himself in after her. Modern-day rich guy rescues his damsel." Classic. The guests weren't just laughing at the Sullivans, they were laughing at me. "This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous." Ryan's mother, Mrs. Sullivan, lost her temper on the spot. "I'm gonna go find him. This wedding is happening today." I stopped her. With Ryan's personality, no one can talk him out of anything right now. I turned to the guests. "Ryan just messaged me. He'll be in the hospital for a few days. The wedding will be postponed, but everything for today's reception was carefully prepared, so please, enjoy yourselves. All red envelopes will be returned in full. Drinks and party favors are on me." Everyone froze for a moment. Then I signaled for dinner to start. People were already starving from the wait, and the banquet was luxurious. Everything was imported and top tier. The gifts and return favors were also extravagant. Many of the party favors were basically up for grabs. The gossip stopped, and their laughter turned to sympathy, for me. But there was no need for their pity, because I didn't marry Ryan Sullivan for his money. It was the Sullivan family that needed mine. Mrs. Sullivan had noticed my feelings for Ryan early on and approached my parents, trying to feel out whether I'd be willing to marry into the Sullivan family. Ever since Mr. Sullivan passed away, the Sullivan Group had been in serious financial trouble. Mrs. Sullivan hoped a marriage alliance could save the company. She knew Ryan was too proud to ask for help, So she spun it the other way, asking if we needed capital and wanted to marry into their family to save our business. I agreed, and so Mrs. Sullivan struck while the iron was hot, using ruthless methods to drive Emily Young away from Ryan. But honestly, drive might be too strong a word. All she really did was leak some rumors through a few people, saying the Sullivan Group was on the brink of bankruptcy. Emily quickly came up with an excuse to break up with Ryan on her own. You think that just because you pleased my mother and married into the Sullivan family, I'll fall in love with you? In a dimly lit bar, the cigarette between Ryan's lips glowed faintly as he spoke. Every word he spat through gritted teeth dripped with cold contempt. Stop dreaming. You're nothing but a pathetic woman who threw herself at me for our family's money. Ryan wasn't wrong. From the moment I agreed to this alliance, I willingly began groveling at his feet. Even when he stayed at a hotel with some other girl, I was the one who packed his change of clothes and delivered them personally. Sometimes he would stare at me, puzzled. Rachel, do you not have any self-respect? Is money from the Sullivan family really that important to you? What Ryan didn't know was, I loved him. Back when my family was struggling and barely getting by, I was forced to kneel by the wealthy kids at my elite school. He casually stepped in front of me. Why bully a girl? If you've got guts, try bullying me. Everyone knew he was the scariest of the Sullivan heirs, and once they saw him standing up for me, no one dared lay a hand on me again. They didn't confront me directly, but they began isolating me behind the scenes. Still, being isolated was better than being beaten or punished. Ryan never knew that his one sentence back then brought warmth to a girl kneeling on the icy ground, clinging to life. At the time, my dad was bankrupt and being hounded by debt collectors. He nearly threw himself in front of a train. My mom, trying to keep my father from killing himself, had a mental breakdown. No one had the energy to care for a teenage girl. Our family was on the verge of collapse, and I felt unbearably alone, but I managed to survive 3 years of high school safely. Whenever someone tried to lay a hand on me, intentionally or not, Ryan would somehow just happen to pass by. He didn't even have to speak. A single sharp glance from him, and they'd run off in fear. He never once spoke to me, but back then, Ryan was like a silent wall that kept danger at bay. So when our family finally made a comeback and the Sullivan Group fell into crisis, Mrs. Sullivan reached out to my parents through intermediaries. They didn't refuse to help. As long as our daughter is willing to marry, we won't object, they said. I looked into Mrs. Sullivan's tear-filled eyes and nodded firmly. I'm willing. But I added one condition. Only if Ryan eventually falls in love with me. Our family, the Monroe family, continued to support the Sullivans financially. But since we only had an engagement and hadn't yet registered or held a wedding, I also asked that the Sullivan Group grant me corresponding shares in the company as outlined in the agreement. Mrs. Sullivan, to her credit, was a straightforward woman. We reached a consensus quickly. As the Sullivan Group gradually filled the financial holes, her desire to move things along became even more apparent. She kept pushing for the wedding between me and Ryan. Sometimes she'd even try to persuade me gently. Look, you and Ryan are already engaged. So what if he doesn't love you? The wedding still needs to happen. I just smiled. Mrs. Sullivan, I can wait. I had the confidence to say that because I knew Ryan cared about his image. He might act cold toward me in public, but I could tell he had changed. He still wore that emotionless mask, but he no longer fooled around in hotels. He'd come back from work and stay in his study all evening. Later, Susie, one of the housekeepers, secretly told me that there was a thick stack of sketches hidden in Ryan's drawer. It's this thick, she said, gesturing with her fingers. And they're all drawings of you, Miss Rachel. I never went snooping to look for myself, but I believed Ryan had changed. Sometimes, when I fell asleep reading on the couch at night, and the moonlight and breeze drifted in through the window, I would feel a pair of warm, strong hands gently placing a blanket over me. Sometimes I'd wake up to find him watching me quietly for a long time. He would always sigh before walking away. But every time I opened my eyes and met Ryan's deep black gaze, his expression would instantly return to that same cold, stoic look. It made me wonder if the tenderness I'd seen with half-shut eyes had just been a dream. But I knew it wasn't. The boiled eggs were already peeled at breakfast, and the oat milk was perfectly mixed and ready. Susie would say with a grin, "It's Mr. Sullivan who wakes up early to make all of it, and he still tries to hide it. I mean, why hide the fact that he's good to his wife? I'm gonna tell it anyway." She'd chuckle, "All of us here are hoping you two get married soon." Everything seemed to be moving smoothly in a beautiful direction. On my birthday, Ryan proposed to me. He still wore that stone-cold face, like someone had a knife to his throat. "Miss Monroe, I'm proposing to you. Happy now?" Mrs. Sullivan scolded him. "What kind of proposal is that, child? Do it properly." But I knew. I knew he had secretly measured the size of my ring finger while I was sleeping, using a ribbon. I knew he had hidden the ring in a handmade Italian suit once it was ready. I even overheard him one day, standing in front of the closet, telling Susie, "No one touches this blue suit. Got it?" Susie nodded repeatedly. "Yes, sir. I won't touch it." Every night after I'd fallen asleep, he'd quietly take the ring out and leave the room. But I wasn't really asleep. I tiptoed barefoot to the door and peeked through the crack. And it was in that moment that I truly fell for Ryan. I believed, wholeheartedly, that he had fallen for me too. We had a big terrace at home, and those nights he slipped away were for practice. He was practicing how to propose. Under the clear winter moonlight, his tall frame glowed silver, like something out of a myth. The cold light only made his proud, cold features more striking. Even though I wasn't standing in front of him, Ryan still knelt down on one knee. I watched him, facing the empty air, say, "Rachel, will you marry me?" His ears flushed red. He looked like a child, one deeply drunk on love. And he was my Ryan. "I will," I would answer sweetly in my heart every time he asked. But every morning, when I woke up, Ryan's face returned to that same frozen, indifferent mask. What didn't change was the steaming milk and oatmeal on the table. I could tell it was him who made it. The milk always a little too hot, and the oatmeal always had 2 red dates in it. I once accidentally saw him searching online for the meaning behind red dates in oatmeal. My face turned red too. On the day of the official proposal, after I accepted the ring, he leaned close to my ear and said, "Go home and wait for me." I didn't understand what he meant, but I went home and waited anyway. When I saw Ryan close the door behind him with that usual cold face, I finally understood what it meant for an iceberg to erupt like a volcano. "I'm yours now. Satisfied?" he whispered. Sweat soaked the bedsheets, and even after he changed them, it wasn't enough. Not until morning. From then on, through countless nights, the sheets were changed again and again. I believed our love had long since transcended everything in the past, and had arrived at a future where we truly belonged to each other. But that belief was shattered on the wedding day. At the hospital, I saw Ryan again. His eyes were tired and there were bruises on his forehead. "I'm fine," were the first words he said when he saw me. I moved past his shoulder and looked at the hospital bed behind him. The girl lying in that bed was the same one from the video. The one in the white cotton gauze dress, Emily Young. Hearing Ryan's voice, she opened her eyes and casually asked, "Ryan, who's that?" Ryan introduced me without hesitation. "This is Rachel." I stared at Emily. This girl wasn't ordinary. Never mind how many times our wedding, between 2 powerful families, the Sullivans and the Monroes, had made it to the top trending list. What really shocked me was how precisely she had chosen the day of our wedding to jump off a bridge on the only road our wedding convoy would take. She actually pretended not to recognize me, and unbelievably, Ryan believed her. "Emily doesn't really use the internet," he explained. "Her life is pretty simple, so she probably hasn't seen anything yet." I smiled. "Oh, is that so?" I pointed to the screen lit up beside Emily's bed. "Looks like this young lady knows how to get online after all. She just might not be great at reading." I leaned in and read aloud, word for word. "Heir of the Sullivan Group jumps into the river with first love. Monroe family's daughter, Rachel, visits the hospital." Ryan turned to look at Emily, seemingly waiting for her to explain. She quickly turned off the phone screen and pouted, speaking in a soft, aggrieved tone. "I just came across it right before Rachel walked in. Sis Rachel, don't blame Ryan. I was the one who threw a tantrum and made a mess. If you're going to scold someone, scold me." She looked up, eyes glistening, about to cry. "Don't cry," I said calmly. "Today, you cried, you made a scene. and you jumped off a bridge, but fortunately, no one died. If someone does die one day, you'll still have time to cry about it then." Emily quickly swallowed her tears. Ryan looked at me and apologized. "Rachel, I know I messed up the wedding, but I couldn't just stand there and watch her die. As for the wedding, once she recovers, we can do it again." I nodded. "Okay. For now, just rest well. We can talk about the wedding later." Just as I turned to leave, I saw Emily raise her hand. Sunlight streamed through the window, landing on her ring finger. There, glittering in the light, was a one-of-a-kind 75-carat pink diamond ring from a top Italian jeweler, worth over $10 million. One of the pair was on my hand, and the other was supposed to be on Ryan's. I had watched Ryan throw that ring into the river like it was trash, all for Emily. And now that same dazzling diamond was sitting right there on her finger. My entire body froze. I felt something rising from the pit of my stomach, threatening to spill out. Ryan must have noticed the change in my expression because he followed my gaze. The next thing I heard was him shouting, "Emily, what are you doing?" Then, in a flurry of panic, Ryan began explaining. "Rachel, please don't take it the wrong way. She's just childish. When she found out I didn't actually throw the ring away, she said she wanted to play with it for a bit. I didn't want her causing a scene at the hospital, so I gave it to her. She'll give it back when she's tired of it." I had never heard Ryan speak so much at once, not from his always cold lips. I used to long for him to explain himself. Like years ago when he came home late and I wished he would just tell me why, anything to show he felt guilty, that he still cared. Or when he made me breakfast or tucked me in at night, I used to hope he'd say something sweet, tell me he loved me, that he wasn't good with words but still felt it deeply. But today, I finally realized he was good with words. He just hadn't wanted to use them with me. Emily threatened to jump into the river, and despite all the trained firefighters present, Ryan went in himself, coaxing and convincing her to come down. Emily asked for a ring, and even though Ryan knew it was the symbol of our commitment meant to bind us together for a lifetime, he handed it over without hesitation. And now, in front of his own bride, he felt the need to explain why another woman had it. "She'll give it back when she gets bored," he said. "Don't take it personally, it's like arguing with a child." What a joke. "Emily Young is 28 years old, Ryan. You're calling her a child?" Ryan looked at me with pleading eyes, his usually sharp gaze now softened, with a desperate need for forgiveness. It was like he wanted me to be some benevolent priest, placing my hand on his head and declaring, "Amen, all is forgiven." But I'm not that kind of God. And Ryan Sullivan isn't that kind of believer. Still, he kept looking at me, waiting for something, anything. "Rachel," he said quietly, "you're not mad at me, right?" I let out a soft, breezy laugh. "You should focus on recovering. The rest can wait until after you're discharged," I said. Then, without hesitation, I turned and tossed the engagement ring into the trash. Susie, who had followed me out, picked it up silently. When our car passed by the villa Ryan and I had shared, I didn't ask the driver to stop. Instead, I went back to my family home. Once we arrived, Susie asked what I wanted to do with the ring. I glanced at our newly adopted stray dog, Dodo, and casually looped the ring around his neck. So there it was, one ring hanging from my dog's collar, and the other being toyed with in Emily's hand. A perfect match. A bitch and a dog, may they live happily ever after. But, when I looked at Dodo again, I immediately regretted it. No. Dodo would never fall for someone who wears a thin cotton dress in the middle of winter. I spoke with Mrs. Sullivan about canceling the engagement. Before she could say anything to plead for her son, I cut her off gently. "Auntie, I agreed to this marriage alliance out of my own free will. Now that the Sullivan group has basically recovered, at least 90%, there's no need for you to feel guilty, even though Ryan and I never officially got married. After all, the Monroe family still holds a good share of Sullivan's stock. We've all made money together. But maybe this is just how fate is. I was never meant to be part of your family." I returned all the expensive jewelry she had brought for me, one piece at a time. "I know you came to apologize on Ryan's behalf, but it's all in the past now. I did truly love him once, and now, I truly don't. I have no regrets about knowing him." Mrs. Sullivan let out a deep sigh. Seeing how resolute I was, she told her driver to carefully take all the jewelry back. Oh, and there's no need to tell Ryan about the breakup, I added. I'd prefer not to be disturbed by him for now. I want some time alone. Worried she might not follow through, I gave her a final reminder. Unless you want the Sullivan Group to lose the Monroe family's financial support. Soft words with a hard edge, Mrs. Sullivan understood clearly. I was determined to cut off everything with Ryan. For the sake of the company, she agreed. Just like that, the once close relationship between our two families became distant and formal. Susie had originally been hired to take care of me and Ryan, but now that we were over, she resigned and returned to her hometown. She was an honest woman, though, and still helped find a replacement housekeeper to manage the villa we used to live in. After wrapping everything up, I left the country that very night. No one knew where I went, except for my parents. Everyone else, including Ryan, thought I had gone on a business trip. When Ryan was discharged from the hospital and returned home, he noticed the new housekeeper immediately. "Where's Susie?" he asked. Susie had an emergency back home, the new housekeeper, Mrs. Shy, explained. He glanced around the villa. The bedroom was empty. I wasn't there. She mentioned Miss Monroe might be away on a business trip, Mrs. She added. It was the first time this villa had ever been without Rachel, and Ryan found it unsettling. He actually hadn't stayed at the hospital very long. The doctor had recommended he remain for another 2 days for observation, just in case of a concussion, but he didn't think it was necessary. Deep down, he had a feeling. I was angry. So as soon as I left, Ryan went and took the ring back from Emily. Truthfully, he had never intended to give it to her in the first place. They were in the same hospital room. Though neither of them had serious injuries, they had both developed mild fevers after falling into the river in winter. At some point during a checkup, Ryan had dozed off. When he woke up, he noticed the ring in his pocket was gone. When he had thrown the ring off the bridge to stop Emily, he hadn't really thrown the ring. He just tossed something random from his pocket to create an illusion. To him, Emily was just like a child. She could be calmed with a few tricks. Back then, Ryan had liked Emily for her dramatic flair. As the heir to the Sullivan Group, he was excellent at his studies, trained in horseback riding, and played top-tier golf among the elite sons of wealthy families. He felt everything in his life was so calculated and weighty. Compared to being at home, Ryan found school to be a bit of a relief. At home, he was constantly under pressure from his father's authority and his mother's expectations. He learned everything they wanted him to master. But the version of himself he liked best was the one at school. Everyone there feared the coldness and authority that naturally radiated from him. Everyone except Emily Young. Her theatrical, childish antics fascinated him. She wasn't afraid of him. In fact, she'd even provoke him sometimes. That was what had drawn Ryan to her back in school. To Ryan, I had once seemed like just a pitiful girl, someone from a bankrupt family who still worked hard at school, only to be bullied by the rich kids. Pretty girls always drew sympathy, and back then he helped me again and again, partly out of amusement. He never spoke to me. But within his cold, cynical detachment, he saw something radiant in the girl named Rachel. Something sacred. Sometimes when lying in bed, he would think of me that way, untouchable, and the thought frustrated him. After all, there were so many girls who liked him, girls who would throw themselves into his bed with the curl of a finger. Yet somehow, it was this girl from a bankrupt family who made him feel inferior. How absurd. That night, as darkness fell, Ryan realized for the first time how big the villa felt. He had never noticed it before. Every time he'd come home, he'd see me on the couch. Most of the time, I was reading. Sometimes I'd be asleep. At first, he thought I was just showing off how studious I was. But one day, he secretly looked through the books I had been reading and finally understood the source of that quiet glow I had back in school. My finance textbooks were thick, full of detailed notes. Latin phrases that could make anyone dizzy became flowing musical notation under my pen. The handwriting, careful, elegant, stirred something in him that made his heart itch. Eventually, he stopped going to bars. After work, he'd come straight home. I'd always be there on the couch with a book. From his study, he could see me bent over, completely focused. He began sketching me with my slightly furrowed brows, me biting my lip in deep thought, even me smiling at a passage in frustration. Every tiny expression, every subtle shift, I filled his mind entirely. Thinking of that, Ryan gave a bitter laugh, because deep down, he had felt unworthy of me. And to hide that inferiority, to protect the pride he clung to, he had kept his gaze cold, his demeanor aloof. He reached for the pillow beside him. This was the first time he'd ever been in bed without me there. But my silk nightgown, tossed aside casually, still lay nearby. He picked it up and pressed it to his face. My scent filled his senses in an instant. In that moment, he felt something stir. And as he gave in to the memory of me, he remembered he had once had me too. It was right after Emily had broken up with him. His mother came to tell him the Sullivan Group would be forming a marriage alliance with the Monroe family, because we needed financial support. Ryan had scoffed. So Rachel really sold herself to our family for money? That shining girl, it turns out, was just like the rest. A marriage alliance, what a joke. She'd sold herself to a man who didn't even love her. So he punished me. He went to a hotel, drank himself into a stupor, and had me personally deliver his change of clothes. He wanted to see me suffer, to make me back down. But money and power didn't change me. And somehow, that made them seem even more precious. Ryan hadn't expected that just one night without me would unravel him so much. His head throbbed. He picked up his phone and called me, but it didn't connect. He glanced at the time, it was already late. She's probably asleep, he thought. After a long pause, he finally decided to send me a message. He cleared his throat and practiced several tones in his head. Then, for the first time in his life, he recorded a voice message. "Baby, I miss you." The moment he sent it, he cringed at how corny it sounded. Embarrassed, he tossed the phone aside before he could hear himself say those mushy words. He fell asleep waiting, and when he woke, he was still clutching my nightgown in his arms. The next morning, there was still no reply from his baby. His sharp nose wrinkled slightly in annoyance. This was the earliest he had ever woken up. Normally, when I was around, he slept so soundly that he always got up late. The new housekeeper was already busy in the kitchen. Out of habit, he stepped in to heat the milk. The housekeeper quickly rushed over to take the cup from his hands. "I'll take care of it," Ryan said, stepping toward the kitchen. He gave a soft smile. "I always make Rachel's hot milk," he added after a pause, his eyes glancing toward the couch. Normally, around this time, Rachel would be sitting there, jotting down thoughts or reading. He stared in that direction, imagining the way she looked. With a gentle tone, laced with something almost sweet, he told the new housekeeper, "I make her oatmeal, too." The new housekeeper, watching Ryan's tall, composed figure reach for the oats, couldn't help but say, "But Miss Rachel isn't here today." Ryan's hand froze midair. He had been so lost in thoughts of her habits, her presence, that he'd forgotten she was supposed to be away on a business trip. He put down the milk and stepped out of the kitchen. Only then did it really hit him, how empty the villa felt. But what was truly hollow wasn't the house. It was the part of him where Rachel used to live. She was gone now, and he was nothing more than a hollow shell in an empty world. Just then, the doorbell rang. Before the new housekeeper could even set foot out of the kitchen, Ryan had already taken long strides toward the door. "She's back," he thought. Rachel must be home. The Sullivan and Monroe business affairs had been going smoothly lately. Even Ryan hadn't had much reason to travel, so if Rachel was away, it could only be for a day or two. Please, he hoped, just 1 or 2 days any longer and I'll lose my mind. He opened the door, only to find Emily Young standing there. She saw the disappointment on his face clearly. "What's with the look? Not happy to see me? I came to apologize to Rachel. I feel awful for interrupting your wedding." But Ryan didn't let her in. "Is it because your fiancé doesn't want to see me?" Emily asked again, not giving up. She thought Ryan saving her at the wedding meant something, that there was still a place for her in his heart. With the wedding postponed, she felt she had plenty of time and chances to win him back. Back then, when Mrs. Sullivan had planted rumors through her people that the Sullivan Group was going bankrupt, Emily panicked. She did some digging and started to believe it might be true. So she broke up with Ryan under the excuse of studying abroad. But years had passed and the Sullivan Group was stronger than ever. Not only had it not gone bankrupt, it was thriving. She had let a golden opportunity slip away, and the thought made her grind her teeth in regret. Emily, Ryan said with a weary tone. "I've always thought of you as a little sister." Regret crept into his voice. In truth, he had started to regret saving her. He should have been at his wedding. But when Emily had sent that message saying she was going to kill herself, he couldn't ignore it. A life was a life. He thought Rachel wouldn't be mad. She had always been so patient, so forgiving, no matter how much he hurt her. He remembered how submissive Rachel used to be, how deeply she had loved him, how she never once got angry. And besides, the Monroe family needed the Sullivan family. They needed the alliance. Rachel had come this far. Surely she wouldn't back out now. Even though firefighters had been on the scene, Ryan had still climbed onto the bridge to stop Emily. Standing before his former first love, he felt like a god, graciously offering her a bit of love and warmth, as if that alone could save her. But what he never realized was, the one who truly needed help wasn't Emily. It was him. It was Ryan Sullivan who needed saving. Just as Ryan was about to close the door on her, Emily suddenly swayed and collapsed toward him. Instinctively, he caught her. "I'm not feeling well," she murmured. "I just want to sit for a bit." Her expression was perfectly crafted, like a pitiful kitten curling up in his arms. Once inside the living room, she made a move to lie down on the couch Rachel always used. Ryan yanked her back sharply. "That's not your place." Instead, he pulled out a separate chair, the one reserved for guests. "You can sit here and rest," Ryan said. But Emily immediately pouted. "I just wanted to lie down." The new housekeeper clearly didn't like this overly delicate, tea-sipping kind of girl. She brought over a cup of green tea and placed it in front of her. "The floor's clean. I just mopped it. Looks like you've got a bit of heat stroke. Lying on the floor of Mr. Pat Sullivan and Mrs. Monroe's villa might suit you best." Emily shot a glare at the housekeeper while Ryan had his back turned. But with him in the room, she still had to keep up the act, playing the sweet, innocent girl. Ryan, meanwhile, had completely zoned out. His eyes were fixed on something, a small suitcase Emily had brought in with her. The longer he looked, the more something tugged at his memory. Suddenly, he turned and rushed into the bedroom he once shared with me. He flung open the closet. The walk-in wardrobe was mostly filled with his clothes, only a small section was mine. Ryan was never the kind to shop for himself. He'd rather spend money sponsoring students or donating to causes than buying himself clothes. Susie had once told him, "Miss Monroe isn't stingy. She just doesn't see the point in owning too many clothes. A few good outfits are more than enough." He had donated to dog shelters, helped rebuild girls' schools after earthquakes. But when it came to my corner of the closet, he had never paid much attention. But Ryan knew exactly how many outfits I had. He had sketched so many drawings of me, mixing and matching clothes in his mind, that he could recall every item I owned. He reached out and began counting. 1, 2, 3, slowly, methodically. What he hoped for, desperately, was to find fewer clothes than usual. That would mean I had packed, that I really was away on a trip. But he counted all the way from the left side to the mirrored wall on the right. Then, not believing himself, he started again, from right to left. The more he counted, the clearer it became. I hadn't taken a single thing. Not one item was missing. By the third time, his hands were trembling. "Sir, what are you looking for? I can help," the new housekeeper asked gently. Watching him pacing in front of the wardrobe, she assumed something had gone missing. But Ryan didn't answer. He just kept counting, obsessively. That was when Emily got up from the living room and wandered to the bedroom doorway. "Ryan, do you need a hand?" The moment she lifted her foot to enter the room, his voice cut through the air like a blade of ice. "Stop right there." Emily had never heard him speak so harshly. Still, she forced a laugh. "Ryan, I'm only trying to help." "I said get out," he growled, picking up a glass vase from the dresser and hurling it toward the door. It hit her square in the face. Blood started to pour instantly. Now, for the first time, she looked genuinely hurt. "Why are you yelling at me? I was just trying to help." Tears welled up in her eyes. She looked up at Ryan, expecting to be met with his usual complicated guilt, maybe even concern. But what she saw instead was a man colder than ever, like a predator, dead-eyed after the kill. "I said get out," he repeated. There was no dramatic emphasis, just a flat, low growl, quiet, but full of gritted teeth rage. Emily didn't even know how she left. Ryan couldn't remember either. All he knew was that in the end, he had lost. He had to face the one thing he didn't want to admit. I wasn't on a business trip. I had never left for work. I hadn't taken anything with me, not clothes, not toiletries, not even a charger. Nothing. He looked down at his phone, still with no reply. He had called several times, but each one went unanswered. Finally, he grabbed his coat and rushed out the door. "Sir, your coat," the housekeeper called after him, scrambling to hand it over. But he was already gone. He ordered the driver to take him straight to the Monroe residence, racing across the city. He had a whole speech prepared. He'd beg if he had to. Apologize. Let me punish him. Whatever it took, he was ready. But when the car pulled up in front of my family's home, the sight that greeted him struck like a punch to the gut. There, around the neck of the family's stray dog Dodo, was the engagement ring. Our engagement ring. Ryan almost lost his balance. Still, swallowing the sting of humiliation, he bent down and removed the ring from the dog's neck. And then, slowly, he forced himself to stand tall again, just barely. As soon as Ryan stepped through the gates of the Monroe estate, he was greeted by Mr. Monroe's calm, distant voice. "You're here. Come in. Have a seat," Mrs. Monroe said, maintaining the graceful poise of a refined matriarch. Ryan looked at them, two people he had once imagined calling Mom and Dad. But now, all he could manage was a polite, strained uncle, auntie. The distance between them was stark, and for the first time in his life, Ryan Sullivan couldn't hold on to his pride. With quiet desperation in his voice, he asked, "Could I please see Rachel? Just once?" Mr. Monroe took a sip of tea. "Rachel's gone abroad," he said calmly. "She asked us not to disturb her for the time being, not even family." Ryan's knuckles turned white from clenching too tightly. He tried again. "Uncle, Auntie, no, I ruined the wedding. I failed Rachel, but someone's life was at stake. I didn't want someone to die on our wedding day." Mrs. Monroe stood abruptly. "You didn't want a death? Did you ever consider the consequences of holding another woman in your arms and jumping into a river on the day of your marriage to my daughter?" Mr. Monroe didn't want to bring up his daughter's pain. He kept his tone measured. There were two possible outcomes. 1. The Sullivan and Monroe families would collapse together. 2. Both families would become a laughingstock on the internet, turned into a viral scandal. But Mrs. Monroe didn't hold back. Her voice trembled with suppressed fury. "Mr. Sullivan, the only reason we're even talking to you today is because Rachel once had feelings for you. You jumped into a river to save another woman on your wedding day. Have you ever stopped to think about how Rachel felt? She loved you, cared for you deeply. And what did you do? You put another woman's life ahead of hers, on your wedding day no less. It's not even like you were the only one who could have saved that girl. Do you know why, when the video hit the internet, everyone assumed you'd abandon Rachel?" Mrs. Monroe's voice grew colder. "Because even strangers could see it. There were 4 or 5 firefighters right next to that girl. She would have been fine. But no, you had to play hero. If you wanted to act out some fantasy of saving the damsel in distress, fine. But don't drag my daughter into it." Seeing both Mr. and Mrs. Monroe trying so hard to keep their composure, Ryan began to panic. He racked his brain for anything, any solution that might redeem himself. And as always, he thought of money and shares. After all, wasn't that why Rachel had insisted on marrying him? For the Sullivan Group's capital? He was the heir. He could give her as much as she wanted. "Uncle, Auntie, I was wrong to ruin the wedding. I'll transfer shares of the Sullivan Group to Rachel, as much as she wants." But just as he finished, he caught the look of disbelief in Mr. Monroe's eyes. "She didn't tell you, did she?" Mr. Monroe asked, raising a brow. Ryan froze. "Well then, Rachel only asked her future mother-in-law not to tell you about the annulment. I didn't expect your mother to actually keep her word." Ryan stared at Mr. Monroe. There was no smile on his face, but behind that experienced, battle-worn expression was unmistakable contempt. "Let me tell you something, Ryan. It was your mother who came to us begging for this marriage. After your father passed, the Sullivan Group's financial situation became critical. Your mother knew Rachel had feelings for you, so she came to us in person, hoping a marriage alliance could bring in capital and save your company. Rachel agreed, and we didn't object. She told us she loved you. She remembered how you stood up for her in high school. We didn't ask for more than that. But we knew Rachel had survived high school alone, relying only on herself. So we let her make her own choice. She wanted to marry you. Then Mr. Monroe narrowed his eyes. And now you talk about giving her shares? Let me tell you something, Ryan. Rachel already owns more shares of the Sullivan Group than you do. She's the largest stakeholder. So tell me, how much are you planning to give to your majority shareholder? If Mr. Monroe could have stepped on Ryan's already shattered pride, he would have. There had been many nights, long before the wedding, when Rachel had cried silently. While Ryan had been out partying, sleeping around, demanding that Rachel deliver fresh clothes to his hotel rooms, she had said nothing. Not once had she spoken ill of him, not even to her father. And when it came time for the wedding, Rachel had told him, "Dad, I know Ryan has changed. I'm sure he really, really loves me. I'm marrying for love." As a father, Mr. Monroe had seen it all. He had watched his daughter go from swallowing her pain in silence to glowing with the joy of love. And in those moments, he had truly felt happy for her. But on the day of the wedding, as a father, he felt his heart shatter all over again. The first time it broke was the day Mrs. Monroe gave birth to me. She had suffered massive bleeding. He stayed by her side for 2 days and 2 nights, and afterward he said he felt like he had aged 10 years. He had silently prayed, asking to trade his own life in exchange for ours. Whether that prayer worked or not, he never knew, but the bleeding stopped, and I was born safely. He never planned to have another child. Having one daughter was enough. He couldn't bear the thought of watching the woman he loved risk her life again for another. But on the wedding day, when he looked at me, he felt as though he'd been transported back to that moment of blood and fear. My face was pale and bloodless, my lips trembling without sound. I couldn't cry, couldn't scream. I was suffocating, fighting just to breathe. That day, he stayed close behind me the entire time. He didn't let his hands shake because he had to protect me, but then he realized I was much stronger than he had imagined, more composed, wiser. He calmed the curious and gossip-hungry guests at the wedding, doing everything he could to preserve the dignity of both families. He even went to the hospital. He had thought perhaps I would forgive Ryan Sullivan again, the way I always did. But when Susie followed me home, holding the engagement ring in her hands and asking what she should do with it, he saw me calmly walk over and hang the ring around our stray dog Dodo's neck. In that moment, he felt a strange sense of relief. His daughter could let go, she could love deeply and walk away just as decisively. She had become someone truly capable. Looking at Ryan standing there now, Mr. Monroe thought, aside from being handsome and doing well in school, this boy was a complete disappointment. Ryan didn't even remember how he got home that day. For the first time, he realized Rachel had never married him for money. From the very beginning, it had always been about love. And yet he had trampled all over it, assuming she was just like everyone else. Now he sat alone in the pitch-black villa, on a guest chair facing the couch where Rachel used to lie. He stared at it for a long time, almost as if she were still there. He used to think Rachel was bathed in a sacred glow, and that if she loved him, maybe he was worthy, maybe he was her chosen one. But now, all he saw was a clown. A fool who had destroyed the one thing that had ever truly mattered. He grabbed a bottle of liquor and smashed it against his own head. Blood streamed down his face, but he didn't feel a thing. Ryan didn't know what else he could do. He sat there like a ghost, like a broken doll tossed in the corner of a landfill, unwanted, forgotten. Day turned to night, night turned to day, then back to night again. The texts he sent remained unanswered. Finally, Ryan collapsed, physically and emotionally. And then he stood, deciding he would go to the ends of the earth if he had to. He would find Rachel, no matter where she was. He didn't spiral into ruin. Instead, he poured himself into running the company. Partly because he knew Rachel still held shares in the Sullivan Group. As long as the company thrived, he felt she was still connected to him, like a faint thread, still tying them together. The other reason was simpler. He had to be better, stronger, for the day they would meet again. From the moment Rachel vanished, Ryan never stopped looking for her. It became his only mission outside of work. Finding Rachel was the one thing he wanted to do more than anything else. Mrs. Sullivan thought her son had brought this on himself. He had let a girl like that slip away and caused a national scandal on his wedding day. But as she watched him become more mature, more composed, she thought, perhaps the pain had made him a man at last. What she didn't know was that beneath that polished exterior, Ryan was covered in scars. It actually wasn't that hard to find someone if they were still in the country. But Rachel had gone abroad, and no one knew exactly where. Ryan exhausted every resource, spent more than anyone could imagine. And then, half a year later, he finally got a lead. He'd booked a flight immediately, 16 hours in the air. And then, standing outside the headquarters of a multinational corporation, he saw her. Rachel. This was the company she had personally invested in, the one she built from scratch here overseas. And by some miracle, the moment he got off the plane, she happened to walk out the front doors. She was still breathtaking, still radiantly beautiful in that quiet, unknowing way. Holy, untouchable. Ryan looked down at himself, straightened his coat. He still had the strong build she liked. His reflection in the glass reassured him he looked the same. As she walked by, heads turned. People couldn't help but stare at her. And then, they looked at him too. Ryan Sullivan. Still so handsome that strangers couldn't help but linger a moment longer. Just then, I saw him, Ryan. After 6 long months, Ryan Sullivan finally heard me say his name again. He saw me put down the small firework I'd been lighting, open my arms, and run toward him, as if the distance and heartbreak between us had never existed. Ryan lit up and opened his arms wide in return, only to watch me leap like a joyful bird into another man's embrace. He froze where he stood. Wrapped in my boyfriend's arms, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure in the corner of my eye. It was Ryan, tall, handsome, still carrying that poised elegance. His arms were wide open, as if waiting to catch someone. And then our eyes met. He looked stunned. It was only then that I remembered. My boyfriend's name sounded exactly like Ryan's. For a second, Ryan must have thought I had been calling out to him. My fiancé looked in the same direction I was staring. "Who's that?" he asked. "Oh, just someone I used to know," I said softly, looping my arm through his. As we walked past Ryan, I offered a polite smile. "It's been a while." But Ryan couldn't speak. He didn't feel like it had been a while, because in his dreams, in every breath he took, in every whisper of wind, I was there. I had become part of the air he lived in. The longing had turned into wind, into rain, into his every heartbeat. Ryan stood there, aching so deeply he wanted to tear himself apart. I heard him speak. "Rachel, can we talk?" My fiancé glanced at Ryan, then back at me. I nodded. "Sure. Let's talk here." Ryan, once the proud heir of the Sullivan family, looked at the man beside me, holding the hand that once belonged to him. But he knew anger would get him nowhere. So he lowered himself. "Rachel," he pleaded softly, "please, don't leave me. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have left you on our wedding day to save Emily. But I love you. We had so many beautiful moments. You loved me once, I know you did." As he spoke, his voice trembled with emotion. He reached out to hold my hand, and then he saw it. The diamond on my ring finger, brilliant and clear, glinting more sharply than the sun on desert sand. It burned his eyes. Ryan staggered, catching himself against the car door to keep from falling. Then I spoke gently. "Saving someone isn't wrong. That was your choice. But Ryan, walking away from you was mine. And that's not wrong either. I don't regret loving you," I continued. "Back then, you were worth it. But I don't regret leaving you either, because the person you became, I no longer wanted to love. I've seen the numbers. The Sullivan Group is doing well. You'll find someone you love again. And me? Maybe I've just been lucky because I already have." I touched the ring on my finger and smiled. "I'm engaged now. Tonight, we have a party with some friends. I won't keep you. Oh, and by the way, my fiancé isn't some stand-in love interest. It's just a coincidence that his name sounds like yours. Goodbye, Ryan." I gave him a courteous smile, just like I would for any stranger, and walked away. Ryan turned his head and watched me leave. A group of our friends ran toward us, laughing and shouting. Champagne bottles popped. Balloons soared into the air. The entire street erupted with joy and celebration. Passers-by clapped and cheered, wishing us happiness. Ryan leaned against the car and slid to the ground. In a foreign land, that was the moment he fell ill and couldn't get back up. When he was finally discharged from the hospital, he turned on his phone. Through the Sullivan Group's press release, through congratulatory messages from every industry and outlet, He saw it. My wedding photo. I was smiling so brightly, so joyfully, but none of it had anything to do with him anymore. Ryan put his phone in his pocket and rubbed the bruised spot where the IV needle had left a mark. His arm was pale and tender from the weeks of infusion. He walked aimlessly into the biting wind. Then he heard someone shouting in rapid English, "Don't. Back away. It's dangerous." Only then did Ryan realize he was standing on the edge of a bridge. He blinked. In the distance, the ocean blurred into the gray sky. He remembered something. Hadn't he once stood on a bridge before, at a wedding? But who had he been trying to save? He couldn't quite recall. All he could remember was that the bridge back then wasn't even a tenth as high as this one, and the water wasn't nearly as deep. He had fallen because that girl had pulled him down with her. And now, he wanted to tell Rachel. He hadn't fallen off that bridge holding Emily Young in his arms. But Ryan could only let out a bitter laugh. What did it matter now? He opened his arms as the sea breeze swept in. Just as he lifted his left foot and prepared to close his eyes, several strong hands pulled him back. Firefighters. A few bystanders. In that moment, something clicked inside him. He realized on the day he interrupted the wedding to save Emily, he never had to. The firefighters had already been standing beside her. They could have pulled her back easily, but he had still rushed forward. He had abandoned the woman who loved him, left her humiliated at their wedding, and threw both families into chaos, all to play a hero. Ryan broke down in tears. Winter snow began to fall, melting into the tracks of his tears. Cold snow and warm sorrow mingled on his cheeks. From that day on, Ryan Sullivan never spoke another word. He moved back into the villa he once shared with Rachel, alone. Year after year, he sat in the study, sketching, over and over again, portraits of her from memory. Her smile, her gaze, her grace. He kept sketching until old age took him. When he died and was buried, according to his last wishes, his coffin was filled with every drawing of Rachel he had ever made in the second half of his life. He couldn't be buried beside the woman he loved. So he chose to be buried with the version of her he had drawn with his own hands. Everyone in the story moved on to their own happily ever afters. Everyone except Ryan Sullivan, who remained behind, trapped in the cold shadow of a past he could never escape. A past called Rachel. And Ryan never walked out of it.